Lonely Woodsman takes in a widow and her 3 kids, unaware they will become his family forever. Cale had always lived alone. For 20 years he had made the remote forests of Verdalis his home. Verdalis was a planet of strange beauty. Tall crystal trees shimmered in the sunlight, and rivers ran with water that glowed faintly in the dark. The wind whispered through the canyons, carrying secrets only those who listened could hear, and Cale had learned to listen. Most humans thought Verdalis was too dangerous to live on. The terrain was rugged, storms could arrive without warning, and the alien wildlife was unpredictable. But Cale liked it. Here, he was free. He didn't need anyone's permission to live or move. He had his cabin, his small vegetable garden, and his loyal rover, Sip, a small, rolling robot that helped him gather firewood and water. Cale's life was simple. He woke at dawn, chopped wood, tended his garden, and explored the forests. He spent evenings by the fire, reading old journals he had found from the first human settlers, imagining the stories of those who had lived here before. Solitude was comfortable. He had no desire for company, or so he thought, but everything changed one cold morning. The sun had barely risen when a bright flash in the sky caught Cale's attention. He squinted against the glare. Something was falling from orbit. Not a meteor, a small transport pod, shaped like a teardrop, with scratches and scorch marks across its hull. It crashed near the edge of the forest, not far from Cale's cabin, sending dirt and crystal shards flying. Cale didn't hesitate. He grabbed his survival kit, jumped onto Sip, and rolled toward the crash site. When he arrived, he saw the pod had split open. Smoke drifted out, and the smell of burnt fuel stung his nose. But that wasn't what caught his attention. Inside the pod, curled together on the cold metal floor, were 4 humans, a woman, and 3 children. The woman's hair was tangled, and her face was streaked with dirt and worry. The children, 2 girls and a boy, looked scared and tired. Their clothes were torn, but nothing suggested serious injury. Cale felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in a long time: concern. He carefully opened the pod's door and extended a hand. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice was calm, even though his heart beat fast. The woman looked up, her eyes wide. I think so," she whispered. We didn't mean to land here. The ship, it broke." Cale nodded. "I can help. Come with me. There's food, water, and shelter in my cabin." She hesitated, glancing at her children. They clung to her, eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you. We don't know anyone here." Cale helped them climb onto Sip one by one. The youngest child, a little girl named Nira, clutched a small stuffed animal. The middle child, Tavin, a boy of about 10, kept looking around nervously. The eldest, Lysa, held her mother's hand tightly but didn't speak. Cale noticed something unusual about their eyes. They seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, reflecting the forest like tiny stars. Cale's cabin wasn't large, but it was warm. He led the family inside and showed them where they could rest. He brought water, dried fruit, and bread from his pantry. Leora, the woman, set the children down gently, letting them eat first. Cale watched her carefully. She was quiet, but there was a strength in the way she moved, in the way she looked after her children. "I'm Cale," he said simply. "I live nearby. You're safe here." "Leora," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "These are Nira, Tavin, and Lysa. Thank you for helping us." Cale shrugged. It's what anyone would do. He didn't tell her that he hadn't spoken to another human in almost 2 decades. It wasn't pride, it was habit. He didn't know how to talk to people anymore. But there was something about Leora and her children that made him want to try. Over the next few hours, Cale showed them how to start a fire safely and shared tips on drinking water from the forest streams. He noticed that the children were curious about everything: the trees, the river, even Sip. Nira giggled as she petted the small robot. Tavin asked endless questions about the forest, and Lysa quietly examined the walls of the cabin, touching the carved symbols Cale had etched into the wood over the years. When evening came, Cale lit a fire in the hearth. He had expected silence, but instead, the children sat close, listening as he told stories of Verdalis' strange creatures and hidden places. He spoke of the glowing crystal fields, the rivers that sang at night, and the cliffs where the wind sounded like music. For the first time in years, Cale felt less alone. The children's eyes were wide with wonder, and even Leora smiled faintly as she listened. Later, as everyone settled in for the night, Cale walked outside. The stars of Verdalis were brighter than any he had seen before. He could see the rings of the planet faintly, reflecting off the crystal trees. He breathed deeply, letting the cold night air fill his lungs. He thought about the family he had taken in. They were strangers, but somehow, He felt that their arrival was not by chance. Something about the way the children moved, the way they looked at the forest, suggested that they belonged here, as much as he did. Back inside, Leora tucked Nira into bed. "You'll be safe here," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Tavan and Lysa were asleep before she could even finish the words. Cale stayed awake, sitting by the fire listening to the soft breathing of the children. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Would they stay? Could he teach them to survive here? Could he survive being responsible for them? He didn't know. But he felt a warmth he hadn't felt in years. The next morning brought light snow, Verdalis's first winter snowfall of the season. Cale and the children went outside to explore. The snow sparkled on the crystal leaves, turning the forest into a wonderland. Nira laughed as she made small snowballs. Tavan tried to follow Cale as he climbed a ridge, and Lysa watched the patterns of the ice forming on the river. Cale noticed again that the children had strange abilities. Nira's laughter seemed to make small plants grow faster through the snow. Tavan could sense which rocks were stable to step on, even in the slippery ice. Lysa touched a broken piece of his old rover, and it lit up faintly, responding to her hands. Cale's brow furrowed. He had never seen humans interact with Verdalis this way before. Leora followed quietly, noticing his gaze. "They've always been like this," she said softly. We didn't understand it either. We've just been surviving until now." Cale nodded slowly. He felt a mix of awe and worry. These children were not ordinary. Perhaps that was why he felt drawn to them, why he had helped them without hesitation. That night, Cale and Leora sat by the fire while the children slept. "I don't usually take people in," Cale admitted. "I don't know how to be part of a family." "You're already part of ours," Leora said. "We're strangers." "Yes, but we can learn from each other." Cale looked at her, and for the first time in years, he smiled fully. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he felt that for the first time, he wasn't alone. Outside, the wind whispered through the crystal trees, as if the forest itself welcomed the new family. And somewhere deep inside, Cale knew that life on Verdalis would never be the same again. The days passed quickly on Verdalis. Snow melted into streams, crystal trees shimmered under sunlight, and Cale began to notice that life with Leora and her children was different from anything he had known. He woke earlier now, not because he needed to, but because the children's laughter and excitement were impossible to ignore. Cale had expected to teach the children about the forest, how to find clean water, which berries were safe to eat, and how to track the patterns of the wind. But he quickly realized that the children were teaching him as much as he was teaching them. Nira, the youngest, had a gentle curiosity that seemed to affect the world around her. She wandered near the small saplings Cale had planted, giggling softly. To Cale's astonishment, the little trees bent slightly toward her, leaves shimmering brighter than usual. Cale rubbed his eyes, certain he had imagined it. But when Nira's fingers brushed a frozen flower, it slowly unfroze, petals trembling before opening fully in the sunlight. "It's not magic," Cale whispered, almost to himself. He knelt beside the sapling. How are you doing this?" Nira tilted her head, her wide eyes innocent and curious. "I don't know. It just happens when I'm happy." She giggled and ran to her mother, leaving Cale staring at the glowing plants. Tavan, the middle child, had a different gift. While exploring the rocky hillsides near the cabin, he could sense changes in the terrain. Slopes that looked dangerous to Cale seemed safe under Tavan's guidance. Streams that appeared shallow hid deep pools, but Tavan could always point to a safe crossing. Cale noticed it one day when the boy led him along a narrow cliff path. Cale's boots slipped, but Tavan grabbed his hand just in time, steady and sure. "Do you know where the rocks will move?" Cale asked later as they returned to the cabin. Tavan shrugged. "I just feel it, like the forest tells me." Cale shook his head, both amazed and cautious. "I've never seen anyone like this." Lysa, the eldest, was perhaps the most surprising. She had always been quiet, observing before speaking, but when she touched Cale's small rover, Sip blinked and whirred to life in a new way. It moved faster, sensing obstacles before they appeared, following her instructions without a single error. Cale realized she could understand the machines in ways he never could. "These kids," Cale muttered to himself one evening. "They're not ordinary humans." Leora, meanwhile, worked alongside Cale in the cabin and the forest, quietly teaching him things he had forgotten. She had a way of noticing small details: the softness of the snow, the angle of sunlight, the signs of approaching weather. She seemed to understand the land instinctively, as though she had lived here before. One morning, as the family walked through the forest, Cale noticed that the children moved almost in rhythm with the forest itself. Nira's laughter caused the wind to stir gently, rustling the crystal trees. Tavin's careful steps kept rocks from slipping or breaking, and Lysa, examining a small control panel of a broken alien drone, managed to wake it from centuries of dormancy. The drone hovered, scanning its surroundings, seemingly recognizing her as a friend. Cale stood back, heart racing. "This is incredible. You all," he stopped, unsure what to say. The words didn't exist. He had seen humans survive on Verdalis before, but never like this. These children were not just surviving, they were shaping their environment. That evening, Cale sat with Leora beside the fire. He could see the worry in her eyes, even as she smiled at the children playing quietly on the floor. "They're special," Cale said softly. Do you know how?" Leora shook her head. "We've always known they were different, but we didn't know how I discussed this, or why. Until now, we've only survived. Now, here, it's like the forest itself answers to them." Cale nodded, staring into the fire. "I've spent years alone here. Never once have I felt like this. But with them, it's like life is brighter, sharper, alive." For the first time, Cale allowed himself to hope that he could belong, not just survive. The forest had been his home, but it had been lonely. Now, with the children's laughter and curiosity filling the air, he began to see that family might be possible, even for someone like him. The next day brought a challenge. Verdalis' weather was unpredictable, and a sudden storm rolled in from the northern plains. Snow and ice whipped through the forest, and Cale realized that the cabin alone might not withstand it. He looked at Leora and the children. He could handle survival alone, but not with them. "We need to prepare," he said. "The storm could last for days." Leora nodded immediately. "We'll help. The children and I. We can do this together." Cale felt a spark of pride as they worked. Nira used her laughter and joy to encourage the small plants near the cabin to bend and shield the walls from drifting snow. Tavin directed the team to strengthen weak supports with fallen logs and rocks, sensing which structures were safest. Lysa, with her quiet focus, reactivated old drones that helped them carry materials quickly. By nightfall, the cabin was fortified, and the surrounding area was safe. Cale stood back, surveying their work. He realized something extraordinary. This family had turned survival into cooperation, and cooperation into strength. When the storm finally arrived, it was fierce. Snow fell like silver rain. Wind howled through the canyons, and the forest shivered under the force. Cale watched in awe as Nira's laughter caused the snow to swirl gently away from the cabin. Tavin moved steadily, ensuring that every support held. Lysa guided the drones to keep watch on trees that threatened to fall, and Leora coordinated everything with calm authority. Cale felt a warmth in his chest. This was more than survival. This was family working together, each member using their gifts, each one making the impossible possible. He realized that he had been lonely not because no one was around, but because no one had ever been his family. Not truly. Not like this. The storm lasted 2 days. During that time, Cale watched the children grow in confidence. They laughed through the wind, helped each other climb snowy slopes, and discovered joy in challenges that would have terrified ordinary humans. He realized that their gifts were not just survival tools, they were a reflection of who they were. Curious, strong, and endlessly adaptable. When the storm cleared, the forest was transformed. Snow glittered on the crystal trees, streams sparkled with clear water, and the air smelled fresh, alive with possibility. Cale looked at the children, their cheeks flushed from cold and excitement. He felt a surge of admiration. They had survived, yes, but they had thrived, even in the harshest conditions. That night, as they sat around the fire, Cale spoke. "I have seen a lot in my life," he said slowly. "But I have never seen humans like you. You are amazing." Nira grinned, hugging her stuffed animal. "We learned from you," she said cheerfully. Tavin smiled shyly. "We just try to help." Lysa looked at him quietly and then said, "We all do better together." Cale nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Yes, together." Leora reached over and took his hand. "You've given us a home," she said softly. "And you've shown us that life can be more than just surviving. We can live, here, with hope." Cale realized that this family had changed him in ways he could not have imagined. His home was no longer just a place of solitude, it was a place of growth, laughter, and learning. The children's gifts, Leora's wisdom, and the connection they shared were transforming not only their lives but his own. He looked outside at the forest, now calm after the storm. Verdalis felt different to him, less wild, less lonely, and more alive. He knew that this was only the beginning. The children's abilities would grow. They would face challenges he could not yet imagine. But for the first time in his life, Cale felt ready to face the future. Not alone, but together. Weeks passed on Verdalis, and life settled into a rhythm. The snow had melted, streams ran full and clear, and the crystal trees shimmered under the warm sunlight. Cale had never felt this much energy in his life. Every day brought laughter, discovery, and a deepening bond with Leora and her children. But Verdalis, despite its beauty, was never predictable. One morning, Cale noticed the air had changed. It was thick and heavy, like the forest itself was holding its breath. The crystal trees swayed unnaturally, and streams rippled in strange patterns. Cale frowned, scanning the horizon. He could see distant clouds swirling over the northern plains, storm clouds, bigger and darker than any he had seen before. "This isn't ordinary weather," Cale said, voice tense. He glanced at Leora and the children, who had been gathering herbs near the cabin. Leora looked up, her brow furrowed. "I can feel it too. The wind, it's warning us." Cale nodded. "We need to prepare. This storm could last for days. It's something different." Nira, running to Cale, tugged at his sleeve. "We can help. We can do something." Her small face was serious, yet hopeful. Cale smiled, kneeling to meet her gaze. "I know you can. But we have to be smart. We'll need everyone to work together." Over the next few hours, Cale and Leora coordinated the cabin's defenses. They reinforced the walls with fallen logs and crystal shards, dug trenches to redirect water from the melting snow, and set up simple channels to protect the garden. But Cale knew the storm's power would exceed anything they had faced. It was not just about survival. It was about using their gifts together to endure. That evening, the storm arrived. Winds howled like a chorus through the canyons, rattling the cabin. Snow fell in sheets, and the temperature dropped sharply. Cale watched the trees bend dangerously under the weight of the icy wind, worried about the fragile balance of the forest around them. Then he noticed the children. Nira ran to the saplings near the cabin. She laughed softly, and as she did, the young trees seemed to bend around the cabin, forming a natural shield against the wind and ice. Cale's eyes widened. "That's incredible," he whispered. Tavin was beside Cale, moving with calm confidence along the trench. He placed stones and logs where the ice might break through, sensing every weak point without hesitation. Even in the blizzard, he never faltered. Cale realized that the boy's ability to read the land was amazing and precise, like the forest itself spoke to him. Lysa, quiet and focused, was inside the cabin, guiding Sip and a few drones to carry supplies and reinforce the structure. She moved her hands over panels and wires, and the machines responded, working faster and smarter than Cale had ever seen. The drones hovered near the roof, securing logs and crystal shards, while the cabin's energy system glowed steadily, feeding warmth to every corner. Cale watched all this with awe. He realized that he had never seen humans capable of so much. Their gifts, their instincts, and their teamwork were beyond ordinary. He had thought that survival depended only on experience and skill, but here, human ingenuity and heart had created something stronger than either. Leora joined him outside, holding Nira's hand. "Look at them," she said quietly. "They're not just surviving, they're protecting everything we've built." Cale nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. Yes, amazing. The storm lasted 2 days. During that time, Cale and Leora guided the children, helping them focus their abilities and work in harmony. They laughed together, encouraged one another, and celebrated small victories, like a broken tree branch being redirected safely away from the cabin, or the drones keeping watch over the ice-covered ground. Cale realized something extraordinary. This family was stronger together than any one of them could be alone. The children's gifts were remarkable, but it was the way they worked with Cale and Leora, listening, learning, and adapting, that made them truly unstoppable. One night, as the storm raged on, Cale and Leora sat inside the cabin while the children slept. The wind howled outside, but inside, the fire burned steady, casting warm light across the room. Cale looked at Leora, feeling a depth of gratitude he had never experienced before. "You've given them a home," he said softly. "And I think they've given me one too." Leora smiled. "We've given each other a home. That's what family does." Cale nodded, thinking of the days before they arrived. His life had been simple, quiet, and safe, but it had been lonely. Now with Leora and the children, it was vivid, full of purpose, and alive. The next morning, the storm had passed. The forest around the cabin was transformed, crystal trees glimmered with ice, streams sparkled under the morning sun, and the air was crisp and clean. Cale stepped outside, taking a deep breath. Verdalis had survived, and so had they. He looked at the children playing in the fresh snow. Nira laughed as her hands made plants bend toward the sunlight. Tavin led Lysa and Sip across a frozen stream, testing the ice with careful steps. And Lysa, examining a broken piece of drone machinery, adjusted its settings until it hummed smoothly, responding to her touch. Cale felt a lump in his throat. They had faced the storm together. And they had thrived. They were more than survivors. They were creators, protectors, and innovators. That afternoon, Cale took the family to the ridge overlooking the valley. The forest stretched endlessly before them, glittering under the sun. He pointed to the distant peaks. "Do you see that?" he asked. "That's where the storm came from. But look at us, we made it through. Together." Leora smiled, holding Cale's hand. "Yes, together." Tavin, watching the streams below, said, "It feels alive, like the forest knows we helped it." Nira ran ahead, scattering snow and giggling. "We did it! We saved everything." Lysa, standing quietly, looked at Cale. "We can do more. We can protect more places. We can learn from the forest and teach it too." Cale's heart swelled. "Yes, that's exactly what we will do." Over the next few weeks, life returned to a new normal. The storm had left signs of its power, but the family worked together to repair minor damage. Cale noticed something changing in the children. They were growing stronger, more confident, and more in tune with Verdalis. Nira could encourage plants to grow almost instantly. Tavin could sense shifts in the wind before they happened. Lysa could fix and control machines that Cale had thought beyond repair. Cale realized that their abilities were not just gifts, they were lessons. He had learned how to survive on Verdalis alone. Now the children were teaching him how to thrive as a family, using creativity, intelligence, and heart. One evening, as the sun set over the crystal forests, the family gathered on the ridge. The sky was painted with gold and purple hues, reflecting off the icy streams below. Cale looked at each of them, Leora, Nira, Tavin, and Lysa, and felt a profound sense of connection. "This is home," he said quietly. "Not just the cabin, not just the forest. This is home because of all of you." Leora rested her head on Cale's shoulder. "We've always had each other. We just didn't know it until now." Nira hugged Cale tightly. "We're a family," she exclaimed. Tavin and Lysa nodded, smiling shyly but confidently. Cale realized that they were right. They were a family, strong, resilient, and united. They had faced a storm together, and in doing so, they had discovered the power of cooperation, trust, and love. As the stars began to appear over Verdalis, Cale felt a sense of awe. The universe was vast, full of challenges and surprises, but no matter what came next, he knew that they could face it together. The children's laughter echoed in the valley, carrying with it a promise. Humanity's strength was not just in survival, it was in connection, ingenuity, and heart. Cale smiled. This was only the beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them as one. Verdalis was no longer just a forest, and Cale was no longer just a woodsman. Together, they were something greater, a family, unstoppable and full of life. And somewhere deep in the shimmering forests, Cale felt the quiet approval of the planet itself. Verdalis had tested them, and they had passed. Not through force, but through unity, courage, and the simple power of humans working together. Time passed on Verdalis, and life for Cale, Leora, and the children settled into a rhythm filled with growth, laughter, and purpose. The storm that had tested them weeks before seemed almost like a memory now, a reminder of how much they had accomplished together. Cale often walked the forests alone for a moment, just to watch Nira, Tavin, and Lysa explore, play, and learn. He smiled quietly, realizing that his quiet life had transformed into something he never could have imagined. The children's abilities had grown stronger. Nira could make plants grow rapidly, coaxing flowers and vines to bloom wherever she went. Tavin could read the land instinctively, sensing shifts in terrain and weather before they happened. Lysa had become a master at understanding and repairing machines, even building devices to help the cabin in the forest. Cale watched them, amazed at how ordinary humans could be so extraordinary when given the right environment and love. One morning, Cale woke to see the three children and Leora working together near the edge of the forest. Nira was laughing as she guided young saplings to grow into protective walls. Tavin directed small bridges over streams that had shifted after recent rains. Lysa had built a small flying drone to help carry supplies and check distant areas of the forest. Cale felt a lump in his throat. The family had grown beyond survival. They were creating harmony between humans and nature. Leora noticed Cale standing quietly nearby. "They're remarkable," she said softly. "And it's because of you. You believed in them, gave them space to grow, and now look, they're thriving." Cale shook his head. "No, it's because of all of us. We learned from each other. That's what made us strong." As the sun rose higher, a small group of travelers approached from the northern ridge. They were humans, like Cale, and a few friendly aliens, curious about the unusual harmony of the forest. Verdalis had a reputation for being unforgiving, and many settlements had failed. But word of Cale's little family had spread quietly, through travelers, reports, and whispers in distant colonies. People wanted to see the family who had survived not through weapons or force, but through ingenuity, cooperation, and heart. The visitors were cautious at first. They had heard rumors of humans with strange abilities here, and they didn't know what to expect. But Cale stepped forward, calm and welcoming. Nira waved happily. Tavin guided the visitors safely across a small stream, and Lysa demonstrated her drones, showing how they could monitor the forest. Leora smiled warmly, introducing everyone to the cabin and explaining how they had endured the storm together. The visitors watched in awe. They had come expecting danger, but what they found was something entirely different: humans using their intelligence, curiosity, and unity to thrive. Cale realized that this was exactly the point of their survival. Humans had always been underestimated, especially on harsh planets like Verdalis. Yet here, in the middle of the forest, the family had proven that adaptability and cooperation were the greatest strength of all. That night, after the visitors had left, Cale sat by the fire with Leora and the children. The forest glowed under the moonlight, crystal trees shimmering like stars. Cale felt a sense of pride unlike anything he had ever known. "They'll tell others about us," he said quietly. "Maybe they'll try the same, work with the forest, help each other. Maybe we can inspire others to see that survival is only the beginning." Nira smiled, brushing snow from her hair. "We'll keep helping. We can make more places bloom." Tavin nodded. "And we can explore more, find more forests, streams, and hills that need protection." Lysa looked at Cale with determination. "We can teach. We can build machines to help humans and other creatures live safely. We can make the forest better for everyone." Cale's heart swelled. These children had grown into leaders, innovators, and protectors. They were his family now, but they were also something more. They were a symbol of humanity's potential when guided by curiosity, love, and unity. Over the next months, Cale, Leora, and the children began to expand their efforts. They repaired old structures left by previous settlers, planted new groves of crystal trees, and even began mapping parts of Verdalis that had been untouched for centuries. Travelers often stopped to learn from them, and slowly, a community began to form, a small, harmonious group of humans and aliens, inspired by Cale's family. Cale sometimes paused to watch Nira laugh as plants grew under her hands, Tavin lead others safely across streams, and Lysa guide machines that moved rocks and cleared debris. Leora worked alongside him, quietly directing the family, ensuring they remained safe and focused. He realized that the home he had built for himself had grown into a home for many, a living example of cooperation and human ingenuity. One evening, as the family gathered on the ridge overlooking the valley, Cale spoke. "Do you see this?" he asked. "This is what we've built together. Not just a cabin, not just a garden, but a home for anyone who wants to learn, grow, and belong." Leora nodded, resting her head on Cale's shoulder. "We didn't just survive. We thrived. And we can help others do the same." Nira twirled in the snow, laughing. "We're a family, and we can make more families." Tavin smiled, pointing toward the distant forest. "There's so much more to explore. We can help every place we find." Lysa looked at Cale with quiet determination. "We can teach. We can build. We can make a future here." Cale felt a lump in his throat. This was more than survival. This was legacy. The family had not only endured Verdalis, they had transformed it, showing that humans could thrive through creativity, empathy, and cooperation. Over the following years, their influence spread across the frontier. Settlers from distant planets came to see how a small family had survived without weapons, without domination, but with heart, intelligence, and teamwork. Children like Nira, Tavin, and Lysa inspired others to discover their own gifts. Forests were repaired, streams cleared, and forgotten technology restored. Cale and Leora guided these efforts, teaching the newcomers to respect the land and work with it rather than against it. Cale often thought back to the day the pod crashed. If he had not chosen to help, none of this would have happened. He realized that life on Verdalis was not about being alone, it was about connecting, sharing, and growing together. The children, once strangers, had become more than family. They had become a force of positive change, proof of humanity's strength when united. One evening, as the sun set and painted the valley gold and purple, Cale stood with the family on the ridge. He looked at the forest, the cabin, the streams, and the small community that had formed. Everything was alive, thriving, and full of promise. "This is home," he said quietly. "Not just for us, but for everyone who believes in hope, love, and the power of working together." Leora smiled, squeezing his hand. "We built this together. That's what makes it strong." Nira, Tavin, and Lysa stood beside them, eyes shining. They had grown from frightened, stranded children into confident, capable humans who could inspire an entire planet. Cale realized that their potential was limitless. As the stars appeared in the night sky, reflecting on the streams and crystal trees, Cale understood something profound. Humanity was not defined by weapons or strength alone. Humans could adapt, create, teach, and connect in ways no one expected. And sometimes, the greatest victories came without a single battle, simply by showing intelligence, courage, and hope. Cale smiled at the children, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. They had survived the storm, they had learned from each other, and they had transformed Verdalis into a place of hope. Leora leaned into him, and the children clustered around them. They were a family, strong, united, and full of promise. And somewhere in the vast forests of Verdalis, Cale felt the quiet acknowledgement of the planet itself. Verdalis had tested them, and they had passed, not by force, but through unity, ingenuity, and love. The family looked out over the valley, imagining the future. Verdalis was vast, full of unknown challenges, but they were ready. Together, they could explore, protect, and inspire. Humans, when united, could overcome even the harshest worlds, not through violence but through heart, intelligence, and cooperation. Cale's heart swelled. He had lived a long life alone, but now he knew the truth. Family, connection, and perseverance were humanity's greatest strengths. And as the stars glittered above Verdalis, he felt certain that the story of this small family would echo across the galaxy, reminding everyone that humans, united and determined, were unstoppable. Together, they would face whatever came next. Together, they would thrive. And together, they would leave a legacy, one of hope, courage, and the enduring power of family. The forest was alive. The cabin was alive. And the family was alive, more alive than ever. On Verdalis, humanity had found its place. And Cale, the once lonely woodsman, had found what he had been missing all along: home, family, and purpose.